What's up, Slam Sector? Welcome to my video on Blood Bowl 2 and 3. I'm Ryan, and I'm going to be talking about my experiences as a new player, approaching both of these games for the first time, being a new player in the Blood Bowl genre. Before that, I'd only read about it in articles, seen people paint miniatures for it, never actually played a game myself on the tabletop. So in this video, I'm going to break down my thoughts into three categories. Game feel, where I'll talk a little bit about UI, interaction, and gameplay. Content, where I'll talk about game modes in the game, customization, and DLC. And then development, which is primarily focused on Blood Bowl 3, since it is the game that's currently under development. Some of the bugs it faced when it first launched, and the future of the game going forward with new content that they're going to be releasing for it. So yeah, let's dive right in. So first thing, I enjoyed playing both games. I thought they were both fun. I thought they both looked nice. Blood Bowl 3 obviously had a little bit more refined graphics, a little bit sharper, but it's a newer game, so that's to be expected. The first thing I noticed in both games was the UI, obviously. Blood Bowl 3 has a bit more of a sleeker, modern design to its UI, I would say, compared to Blood Bowl 2, which has a little bit more character in some of their UI elements. Things like the animated backdrop with Jim and Bob, a little bit more weathering on the buttons, and things like artwork in the kickoff events. They give it just a little bit more flavor. I did find some of the UI elements in Blood Bowl 2 to be a little bit easier to notice or read than Blood Bowl 3. They're a little more simple, less stylized, and so when the window would pop up with your options, it was very clear what you could do. Whereas in Blood Bowl 3, there was a couple times where the action wheel would pop up and it would kind of blend in with the transparencies with the background, and I just kind of missed something because I was a new player and I wasn't super familiar with the game, and it wasn't very clear. Another thing that happened in Blood Bowl 3 was it took me a minute to find the in turn button. In Blood Bowl 2, it's down in the bottom right of the screen, a good place in the hierarchy of the screen for you to discover. Where in Blood Bowl 3, it's up in the scoreboard, I believe, and it's not readily apparent, at least to me, that it was a button at first. I did figure it out, obviously, but it took me a minute. So it was nice that the interactions were very clear in Blood Bowl 2. I did like some of the styling in Blood Bowl 3, so it's kind of a give and take. One thing I did really enjoy in Blood Bowl 2 was Cabal Vision. That would show you the result of an action when you're trying to make up your mind of what, die to pick when you blocked a character. And as a new player who might miss some of the details about enemy players, having that resolution was a nice thing to inform me about how an action would turn out. As far as interaction in both games, Blood Bowl 3 uses a combination of mouse and keyboard, and I found that to be a bit clunky. Having to lock in my moves with a spacebar press didn't have the same flow as just using purely the mouse for Blood Bowl 2, clicking on a player, selecting their action, and then clicking to confirm. So I liked that aspect of Blood Bowl 2 a bit better. Blood Bowl 2 also gave me indications when I was trying to do an action wrong, specifically the blitz. And I struggled a little bit in Blood Bowl 3 because I did not realize you had to signify that you're going to do the blitz before you did your move. And Blood Bowl 3 just told me I couldn't blitz. Blood Bowl 2 gave me a pop-up message saying, hey, you have to declare this before you move. So I didn't know that until I played Blood Bowl 2. And again, I'm a new player, so things like that help me out quite a bit. Blood Bowl 3 does have a very nice camera, however, which allows for better interaction with the players on the field sometimes, especially when you have large characters that can block your line of sight. Might make it hard to click on something or see sort of the state of the board. Blood Bowl 2 has a number of camera positions you can move the camera into, and you can zoom in and out. And so you can get a view of the field, but it was nice being able to spin the camera around, have that full control. Moving on to gameplay. In general, I felt like events and animations in Blood Bowl 3 were a bit expedited or rushed compared to Blood Bowl 2. A good example of that is the touchbacks. In Blood Bowl 3, when you kick the ball out of bounds, it just kind of jumps to the next game state. Whereas in Blood Bowl 2, you can see the ball leave the field, you can see the referee blow his whistle, and then you can see him throw the ball back onto the field. And it even gives you a big indication that a touchback has happened. And maybe it's because I'm not as sports savvy or new to Blood Bowl, but it was nice getting that explanation and that bit of, I guess, exposition as a new player. The animations in Blood Bowl 3 similarly kind of felt fast and not as punchy, didn't have as much connection as the ones in Blood Bowl 2. That it seemed to me, at least, to have a little bit more of a slow motion, had a little more impact when the players would block another player. In general, I think the animations were about equivalent. I think the quality of them were similar. But that's a little extra time kind of adds to the feel of the game for me. An element I do like between Blood Bowl 2 and 3 is that in Blood Bowl 3, everything is handled like a dice roll. In Blood Bowl 2, you get percentiles for certain actions that you're taking, such as dodge or throwing the ball. As someone who's like primarily a tabletop player, I enjoy that sort of dice focus, like having a 2-up to succeed a dodge, as opposed to 80-something percentile chance. Something else that I really like about the way Blood Bowl 2 handles things is in relation to the pregame lineup before a match and halftime. So in Blood Bowl 3, in the pregame lineup, when the camera pans through the teams, your team's standing there and they're kind of in their like idle, standing in a square animation. Just kind of looks like they're ready to start blocking. And during halftime, they're in a very static pose, just lined up on the side of the field, and the camera just kind of pans over them and then just goes back to the game. In Blood Bowl 2, the pregame lineup, they have a different animation. They're standing there with their helmets off, lined up like a real team would be, and during halftime, they actually show them running off the pitch. And for me, I really like little details like that. It helps me, get into the spirit of the game, feel the immersion. It's just part of the ceremony of like a sporting event, to me at least. I feel like Blood Bowl 3 kind of loses a little something by eliminating those details and some of the other things I mentioned previously. Like, just a little bit of character in how it's been designed and how, what they show and what they don't show. I think perhaps one of the big considerations in Blood Bowl 3 was a push for streamlining the game a bit, making the matches go a little bit faster, less downtime for animations and things, which I could see being a good improvement for like competitive play if you're running a competition, for people who just like want to get their matches in. But for someone who's more of a casual player, just having fun, I kind of like those little bits of flavor or character, whatever you want to call them. But there's merits to both ways of doing things, and I think they have their place. But yeah. Moving on to content. Both games have very similar game modes that you can play. They have campaign, they have leagues and competitions, they have impromptu matches you can do against AI or your friends. So the options for how to play are pretty similar. One thing I did notice in Blood Bowl 2 is you have the ability to just sort of dive right into a competition that you create, and you can do that solo. And it's very easy just to like set up a cup with AI and do like a little elimination tournament, essentially. Whereas in Blood Bowl 3, as far as I could tell, you would have to set up the league, set up the competition, and put a little more work into it before you could actually play that. It was nice to just be able to dive right in and fight a bunch of AI and see how long I could last in Blood Bowl 2. So I liked that, the way they did that with their leagues. Going on to customization, both games let you customize your characters and change their appearances and create your own custom team. In Blood Bowl 2, when you're creating your team, after you have your name and you pick your logo, you can choose your uniform from a set of presets. And then when you're recruiting your players, you can modify their head and you can set their name to something custom at that point. After you've recruited your team, as far as I understand it, there's no way to really go back in and edit any of that. You're sort of locked into your team colors, your team uniform pattern, and your player appearances. In contrast, in Blood Bowl 3, you can edit that stuff after you create your team. And there's a few other differences as well. When you're creating your team in Blood Bowl 3, you can pick 3 colors to create your uniform and then apply those to a pattern. And so you can really get creative with what your uniform is going to look like. You have a little more freedom, and there's going to be more potential styles of uniform out there. So that's a nice touch that they added into Blood Bowl 3. As far as player customization, when you're recruiting them, I did not see a way to edit them at that time. But after you've recruited them, you can go into your roster and select a player and go in and customize their name and their appearance. Which I thought was cool, because if I have a player who gets notorious for doing something, it'd be cool to be able to go in and give them a nickname or something later on in a competition or a league. As far as changing their appearance, all of the Blood Bowl 3 players, when you recruit them, have the same look for their class, unlike Blood Bowl 2, where they'll have a randomized head. So the only way you can change that is through microtransactions. You can go into the Blood Bowl 3 store and buy components like a head or a shoulder, torso, and change the appearance of your players. Now, that was sort of controversial when they first launched, because at that time, if you bought a head for an orc on, your orc team, you would not be able to use that head on a different orc team if you made it. They've since changed that to where you can transfer those cosmetics around between your teams, but it's not like you're unlocking that head for all your teams. You just have one instance of that head that you have to move around. It's a little frustrating there's no options at the moment that don't cost money. However, in their community updates, they have talked about that they're going to implement a leveling system that will allow players to unlock some cosmetics through just playing the game, as well as unlocking Warpstone, which will then allow them to buy other cosmetics from the store that they would normally have to spend money on. So this brings us to the topic of DLC. Because in addition to talking about the leveling system, they talked about something called Blood Pass in these community updates. Blood Pass, from what I understand it, will be similar to a Battle Pass in other games, where you advance through it over a period of time and you unlock content, with the final content being potentially a new team. They said they wanted to create a system that allowed players to gain access to this content just by playing the game, as well as, if they wanted to, purchase the content. So I imagine there'll be options for a more traditional DLC experience of direct purchase, like what Blood Bowl 2 had with their teams and their uniforms and star players, I believe. I bought the Legendary Edition because the game had been out for a while, so I got all of that included. But if I understand correctly, it was sold as individual DLCs in Blood Bowl 2 originally. We'll have to see how they implement some of these changes. It would have been nice for some of these features to be in the game at launch. I think it would have held off some of the criticism because it would have allowed a pathway towards getting cosmetic items without having to shell out real money. And this brings us to the topic of development, both looking to the horizon for Blood Bowl 3 as well as looking back at its launch. I read a number of reviews about bugs and issues people had with the game when it first came out. I myself didn't experience many of these issues. I played it pretty close to launch, but I think there was a lot of patches that got pushed to fix some of the more glaring problems with the game before I really got involved with it. I did have one crash, and I had a Minotaur moonwalk across the field and punch somebody instead of moving normally, but it seems like the company has been pushing frequent patches to fix the bugs as they crop up, which is nice, but it is a bad look for a game to have a lot of problems like this at launch. I also, previously mentioned some of the controversy about the microtransactions at launch, which they amended, so it's had a rocky start. Looking forward, we'll have to see how they implement things like the leveling system and the Blood Pass, how they decide to roll out new teams, whether it is, like I talked about, as a reward in the Blood Pass and also available for purchase, and how they continue to develop the customization system, and whether or not they'll be responsive to the community and sort of tweak the game towards a state where it is stable and also enjoyable. So what's the takeaway from all this? For me, I think that Blood Bowl 3 implements some cool features such as the improved camera, some improved ability to customize your team and change it after you create it. But it loses a little bit of the spirit and a little bit of the character that was in Blood Bowl 2 that I came to really enjoy after playing Blood Bowl 2. So we'll have to see what they do with Blood Bowl 3. It's probably going to change a good bit with some of these things that they're planning on implementing. And we'll just have to wait and see how they roll it out. If I had to pick one of the two to play at the exclusion of the other at the moment, I would probably pick Blood Bowl 2, just for those fun elements that really get me immersed in the game more. Blood Bowl 2 does have more teams at the moment. I don't really weigh that into my assessment because eventually Blood Bowl 3 will have a multitude of teams rolled out with the Blood Pass, so it's not fair to weigh that in on my assessment on the quality of the game at this time. So let me know what you think. If there's topics I didn't cover, leave a comment. Let me know if you think Blood Bowl 3 will have a chance to kind of shake off some of its rough start and shine moving forward. And thanks for watching, and tune in to Slam Sector for more content coming up. Thanks.